I'm Mary Pepino, and welcome to Fit for You, the show that teaches you how to live a healthier and more fit lifestyle. Today, we're going to talk about childhood obesity and how the whole familial concept comes into play when we're talking about kids and obesity. Unfortunately, the statistics are getting higher and higher every year. We have more information on how to eat healthier and how to get more active, but we're getting heavier and unhealthier, and it's starting at a really young age. I'm going to be joined by my friend and an individual who spent a lot of time studying this subject, Memo, and hopefully will give you some great tips and great ideas on how to get healthier and more fit from a very young age. It's with great pleasure I welcome back my dear friend, our licensed practical clinical counselor, Memo. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
Yes, and Rose, you are such an important person to this whole childhood obesity issue, families and children, because you've had experience. Like I said, you're a mom, you're a grandmother, you're an aunt, you're a mentor, and you have been studying and working with this issue for quite some time.
I have. And in the past 40 years, it has risen exponentially. We spend $190 billion because of the epidemic of childhood obesity.
And I want to make sure that everybody understands this is lifestyle induced. This isn't, a genetic predisposition to something. This is what we're creating because of lack of exercise, poor food choices.
Absolutely. And you see the numbers just rising. From 2 to 5 years, it has risen from 4 to 10% childhood obesity. From 11 to 15 years old, it's risen to 20%. From childhood to 19 years, it's risen to 18% of children that are considered clinically obese.
And the sad part is, in today's world, we have more knowledge about what to eat and how to eat. We have more health clubs. We have more opportunities to figure out how to exercise between videos and tapes and things you can now do on your computer. But we're getting heavier and unhealthier.
Well, and you can see a real difference from 40 years ago to today. If you look at households 40 years ago, 80% of households were mom and dad were in the household. Today, 1 in 2 families are single-family households. 40 years ago, 20% of kids were in daycare. Today, and it's not a criticism, it's just a fact, 60% of kids are in daycare. We need the 2 family incomes to survive today. So is it very different? I remember as a child listening to the radio. There was no television until I was about 6 years old. That tells you how old I am, by the way. But today we have computers, we have iPhones, we have iPads, we have video games. And so kids are sitting more than they're moving. And today it is a much faster pace. So parents, on the way to a football game, they have to come home and feed their kids dinner, and so they stop at a fast food restaurant. I remember as a child there was only one fast food place on the market, and they used to have 1 million hamburgers sold, and then within a 6-month period 2 million hamburgers sold. And again, that tells you how old I am. They got to be there were so many sold that they could not keep up with the pace. So now they took the signs down, and you see fast food places on every corner. That particular fast food place, as well as every other fast food place, they supersize. Mm-hmm. So everything, for an extra 50 cents, you can get a 6-ounce drink that was when I was a child to an 11-ounce drink. There's 31% more calories in food today than there was 40 years ago.
By the way, the supersized drinks are now like over 30 ounces.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're getting a third more sugar than you did. So it's a combination of things. It's not one thing, and it's not with any one particular group specifically. It's across the board. It truly is an epidemic in this country. It is in other countries, but not to the extent that we experience it today.
Well, I think in Europe, I think in some of the other countries, lifestyle is you go to the store almost daily. You don't have, the refined and processed as much as we have in our country. Industrialization, as I've said many times, is great in many ways, but it hasn't been good from a health and fitness standpoint because it's making food more convenient that can sit on a shelf that is refined and processed, and we're moving a lot less because of it.
Well, and you're seeing in schools, you're seeing vending machines that you never saw before. There were these little old ladies who cooked in the back in the cafeteria, and you either brought your lunch or you bought your lunch, but now we have vending machines in schools. Do you realize that today physical education is primarily in most counties in this country only in elementary ed?
That was very disappointing.
Yes, it's eliminated in most high schools. And so we lived a slower pace before, but there was a little bit more activity. Teachers in schools were valued. Their opinions were valued. Violence against teachers has risen in the past 40 years by 500%. We don't value the same things we used to value. So where does it leave us? I remember old movies that I watched as a kid. Donna Reed, that tells you how old I am. Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best. Let me tell you what those stories said. The children came home. There was no stress because you never knew what the fathers did, except Ozzie Nelson. He was a singer. He had his own band. But you didn't know what fathers did. The mothers stayed home. The mothers were always dressed in dresses as they were cleaning house. They looked better cleaning house than most of us did on our wedding day. And the kids would come home from school at 3 o'clock and sit and have cookies, and they would talk about the problems that they had in school. They were noisy, they chewed gum, they weren't wearing the right thing. Those were the problems.
Oh, and they were eating a homemade cookie.
They were eating a homemade cookie, and one cookie. Today, years ago, it was one snack when you came home. Today, it's 3 to 5 snacks per child. And so today, we're dealing with childhood obesity. We're dealing with addictions. We're dealing with depression. You know, they say 17% of kids between 13 and 15 are clinically depressed.
Well, and if they're not eating well, and if they're not moving, they're not getting good sleep, depression can result from that. So
Absolutely.
There again, some depression can be lifestyle induced.
Absolutely it can.
And so I think the purpose of today's show is let's start with the things that we can change to fix this problem. We've done a great job of advancing our lifestyles into this century. Now we have to advance how we eat and how we exercise and make it more a part of our regular life, as opposed to just in the old days where they could rely on walking a lot more because you didn't have the conveniences and transportation we have. Kids playing outside. Kids had to go play outside. Where were they going to play? Like you said, TV was limited. They didn't have the technology with phones and pads and computers.
Absolutely.
I love I think one of the most important things too as we talk about family is family today, and one of the things I love about the show Modern Family, it doesn't have to be what we think of as a traditional family. A family could be a single parent, it could be two parents, it could be an adoptive parent, it could be a biological parent, it could be a foster parent. it could be many, many things, but who's that immediate influence on you that's leading the household, that's selecting the food, that is mentoring and parenting your, overseeing your activities and influencing you to tell you, hey, maybe it's time to get off the computer and read a little bit. I love the story about your nephew who is in the technological world. And tell us what he tells his kids.
Well, you know what, it's interesting. It's my godchild who was at our house yesterday, and he's just an incredible man, and he heads an entire technological world in Toledo, Ohio. And he said technology is wonderful. Obviously, he does all of the computers for schools, etc. And he said, but it teaches you that you are in control of things. You're in control of games. You're in control of what you're doing on the computer. And he said, but that's what kids are learning, that they can be in control of things. But when they get off of the computer, they're not in control of life. Bad things happen. And he said, so he teaches his children, you have a limited time on the computer, you have a limited time on the iPad, and even though those are good skills to learn, and I'm not saying get rid of your computer or your iPad or your cell phone, I'm saying you need to know the positives about those things, and you need to know the negatives. If your child is on the computer or on the iPad too much, they're going to get the concept that they can control the world, and they can't, because bad things happen and they have to have a whole other skill set. And that's what he said. He gets them off of the computers and he says, all right, you've had a disappointment. How are you going to deal with it? Because the computer is not going to teach you those skill sets. And I thought that was really critical. Control is the issue. And when I've seen young people or adults with eating disorders, control is the issue. Mm-hmm. And so for children, that's a really valuable lesson to teach them, how to not try to control the world, as the computer has taught them, but how to control their feelings, how to control themselves. And I think that's a really important lesson for parents to teach their kids.
And it's going to lead us into, let's start with, a good parenting. Let's start with, and balance is critical, but
yes.
When we were preparing for our segment, you educated me on 3 types of parenting.
Yes.
Explain those.
Well, everyone seems to know the concept and the term helicopter parenting. And that's where parents kind of hover over their kids. They monitor what they eat. They monitor what they do. They're in charge of their children's lives, which parents need to be. But this kind of goes off the chart as to just possessing their children and helicoptering everything. Now, I understand today parents are more afraid. It's a horrible world out there, and parents are more fearful for their children to go out and play the whole day and come in by dark. You can't do that today. It's just a different world. So I understand the helicopter parenting, but what they don't teach their children to be is competent, confident, and independent. And those are the 3 concepts which we'll talk about as we go along. I think there are 3 important concepts. That's our job as a parent. That's our job as a grandma. That's our job as for anyone who is dealing with our children or grandchildren. The second concept, which is a relatively new concept, is the lawnmower parent. The lawnmower parent we saw in Texas when the mother kind of ran over a cheerleader so her daughter would be the cheerleader. And that is, I will run over anyone who gets in my child's way, so my child will be number 1, which also breeds narcissism, self-centeredness, and it does not help build your child's competence or confidence or independence because you're interfering with it.
And narcissism has really gotten much greater over the last several years, hasn't it, than we've seen in the past? We're finding this in clinical studies.
Absolutely. Narcissism 25 years ago was a term that was not used all that often, and psychiatrists and psychologists are saying that almost everyone that they're treating today, that they need to treat apart, no matter what they have as the diagnosis, They have to treat a part of narcissism.
Define it quickly, just in case some of our viewers aren't familiar with it.
It's where I am the center of the world, and everyone has to. That's the easiest way. There are a lot of technical terms for it, but I'm the center of the world, and everyone has to cater to me, and my opinion and my needs are more important than everyone else's. I'm important. I'm special. And we used to say that to our kids, you're special, but today people really believe that everyone needs to foster their needs, their wants, their desires 100%.
And I find in a narcissist, nothing is their fault. It's always somebody else's fault. And if you don't see things from their perspective, they can be very, very nasty towards you, very unaccepting of your opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's never their fault. It's always someone else's fault. And so because they think they're right all the time. And so it really is not a good lesson to teach your kids.
And I think it's important to let your kids, let your kids, and we can jump over to this. I want to get to the third, because this is where it's important to talk also about when your kids do something wrong. Everybody's going to make a mistake. You have to teach your kids, you're going to be wrong at times, and it's okay to be wrong, but then be sorry and work towards not making the same mistake twice, and own the fact that you were wrong.
Correct.
It's okay.
We all make mistakes, and if you teach your child that they're not going to make mistakes, you're not teaching them a valuable lesson in life. I think it's good for parents to sit at dinner and say, I made a mistake today, to let them see that you're not perfect, to let them see that you make mistakes and you recover from them. And I think parents don't want to let their children see them make a mistake. So there's perfectionism. And I think there's a real difference between perfectionism and excellence. And we all strive for excellence, but we should not be striving for perfectionism.
And that's a big problem with, like you say, the lawnmower parent.
Yes.
That's a big problem when we talk about images that we're trying to create, or images when we see models on the covers of magazines, for example, especially to these young girls and some of these young gentlemen, when they think they have to strive to be this perfect picture that even when they're younger could be airbrushed and touched up, and someone is spending hours with them, making them up and designing, which it's lovely to see. But understand,
it's not real.
Right.
That's not real.
Right. That's a look that has been created, but that's not that. And that you should strive to be the best you can be.
Absolutely. And I think what happens is at some point in a child's life, especially if they have overeaten and they're a little heavy, someone says something and then they stop eating, and that's the thing they are in control of, and that creates anorexia or bulimia. And so, it can switch from a child who is heavy to then a really severe eating disorder. So I think parents need to start young with their kids. And trust me, I like cookies and brownies as much as anyone else. But, yesterday we had family and friends there. I had a lot of fruits and vegetables. I had some desserts, but there were a lot of healthy things there that the kids were then introduced to, and the kids were had a lot of choices of a lot of fruit and different fruits. We had figs yesterday. My godson who was there said, "I've never eaten a fig. What is this?" And so trying to introduce them to some different things, but that are healthy.
Right, and that's the key. You can enjoy the cake and the cookie and it's not about being perfectionist, but make sure you have other choices to balance it.
Absolutely.
The problem is coming because we don't have fruits and vegetables and lean proteins and so on as part of our diet. We're eating processed, refined in our instant potatoes and our canned vegetables, and maybe we don't even have fruits and vegetables, or we give a little teeny tiny salad instead of a nice larger portion, and we're giving a huge portion maybe of an instant mashed potato. That's where I think we have to reverse it.
Right. And I think that's a critical issue, is providing really good nutritional things as options. I think you also have to know where you've come from. And I think, from my culture, if you fell, if you got hurt, have a cookie. You don't.
Oh,
you don't
I'm
offer-
Italian, so I totally get it. My grandmother's life was, making food, and you ate whether you're happy, sad, sick, health, whatever.
Pretty much, and we are of Italian descent as well,
Mm-hmm.
and so we celebrate with food, we grieve with food, we depress with food.
Oh, yeah.
If you're hurt, you get a cookie, and we need to change that thinking. And you need to know as a mom, gee, I'm going to change that. That's what I'm triggered to do.
Or dad.
Or dad, or grandma.
Right.
I'm just as bad about it.
Right.
When the kids come to the house, I have fun things for them to eat, but I also have fruits and vegetables, and I'm as guilty as anyone else, and I have to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to just have chocolate bars for my one grandson who walks in the house and says, chocolate. He wants a chocolate bar, but there are other options there for him as well.
We're going to talk about, we're going to get back to, I think it's important that parents start to think about, it's good to maybe start to create a few of your own traditions. But before I jump there, give me the third kind of parents who have helicopter, lawnmower, and then the one we should all strive to be, right?
Absolutely. And we'll focus most of the program on this parent and how we can incorporate some really positive things with this parent. And this parent is the lighthouse parent. And just as the lighthouse acts as a beacon for ships coming into port, I really believe parents need to act as a beacon for their children. They need to express themselves rather than their words. They need to express themselves with who they are. So if you're telling your child not to eat certain things and you're eating those things, your actions speak louder than your words. So I'm a firm believer as parents, and I use the metaphor of doing a puzzle.
I love this because your advice is start with your boundaries. And boundaries are key, as you have taught me over the years, in any relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But I love your puzzle for the parenting, so describe.
So when I'm putting together a puzzle with my granddaughter, and my one granddaughter, Gabriella, loves to do puzzles, we start out with all of the edges.
Because they're flat.
All the straight pieces. It's easy. You don't start out in the middle. And I believe when you start out with the edges and you create the puzzle, the outline, that's the boundary. And then you can put in all of the pieces on the internal part of the puzzle. I believe parents need to create the boundary for their family. They need to create the external pieces that create the boundary of the puzzle. And kids then need to make some decisions and need to control a little bit of their life on the internal pieces. So they're going to put a piece in and it's not going to fit. And then they take it out. And then they'll put another piece in and it fits. And as long as it's within the boundaries of the puzzle that the parents have created, then you're letting them create their own confidence, their own confidence, and their own independence. You're not controlling every part of their life. And I think that's important, as long as they work within the boundaries of the puzzle. And you say, well, how does that work in practical pieces? The rule in our household was, if you start football this year, you're not quitting in the middle.
Well, and let me give you another great example, I think. So let's talk about, we're going to have, and it could be on a weekend or it can be during the week, we're going to set aside this evening or this weekend day for family night or family day. And we're going to let the kids, just an idea, but I think it's a great one that shows the boundaries. Okay, so that's the boundary. If so-and-so calls and they really want, your friend, and it's, I want to go over and play. No, it's family night. And you also said, when we were talking about this, preparing for our segment today, that if the parent has something that comes up, that unless it's urgent, it's important for the parent to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that either. I'm going to be with my family because this is our family time together, right?
Absolutely.
So it goes both ways.
It goes both ways. And then that's honoring your children, and you're expecting your children to honor you. Mm-hmm. And so you're honoring the family. And I think that's really critical, to let kids make mistakes. Mm-hmm. because I think we expect perfection from our kids today. And I have to tell you, it's harder to get into tech school, into college. I mean, the pressures put on these kids are astronomical. And so as parents, we want our kids to do well. We want our kids to get into the whatever apprentice school they want to go to or get the job they want. So we expect them to be perfectionists, and we expect them not to make mistakes. And that's not teaching them a valuable lesson in life. So encouraging them, not encouraging them to make mistakes, but allowing it and saying, what did you learn from that mistake? You know, where did that drive you? Why are you feeling so badly? And I'm a firm believer that kids don't know what their feelings are today.
And they need to be able to express who they are. Learn within the boundaries. Let your child show you and tell you who they are, what they're feeling, and don't jump to be so critical maybe. Listen, it's important, right?
Absolutely. And I know this seems like it's so way far off from childhood obesity, but I think all of this kind of feeds into it. I think if kids are feeling bad when they're little, they're going to want to stuff those feelings down that they don't even know about with something sweet.
Food's the easiest thing for us to turn to because it's like, it's very comforting. Food is very comforting.
It's very comforting.
And it makes you feel loved. So if you don't feel that acceptance, and many parents, and I really believe this, truly love and care about their kids, but they don't even realize that their kids aren't feeling it. Perception's reality. Even though you may, have great intentions and intend and show. Well, I'm showing my love. I totally love them. But what are they perceiving? Are they feeling it?
Well, and I think that's that approval. No matter what your kid does, you should still love them and approve of them. You may disapprove of what they're doing, and I call that the shame versus guilt thing. I'm a firm believer that guilt is okay. If you have done something wrong, you should feel guilty. Shame is another concept. Shame is, I don't like who you are. I don't like your core. And when I was doing a lot of substance abuse, especially with teenagers, they felt shamed. And shame-based kids are led to addictions. Not just food, but they're led to drugs and alcohol and prescription drugs as well as illegal drugs. Illegal drugs today are off the chart. Substance abuse is off the chart today with young people. And unfortunately, when I was in college, there were young people who were using some pot, and you stayed away. Today, young people, heroin is a drug of choice. It's a cheap drug.
Scary.
It's very frightening. But you can start with your kids as a parent by saying, let's talk about your feelings. And there are differences between feelings and thoughts. I think, and that's data, I feel. And a lot of young people today don't know what their feelings are. Do you feel happy, sad, glad, mad, confused, depressed? And my kids will say I was horrible with them because I was always at the dinner table. How did you feel today? Oh, Mom, please. My daughter was really good at it. Oh, Mom, I felt this, this, and this. And the boys would kind of raise their eyes like, please, I don't want to talk about my feelings. But it's important for young people to talk about their feelings and to know that there are no good feelings or bad feelings. Feelings are feelings. If you're feeling angry, it's a feeling. It's not a bad feeling. So what you do with that feeling is critical and important. And that is a parent's job, because if not, all of those feelings that we label as negative, they will bury inside of them with something. They will retreat and they'll bury it with a cookie, with a brownie, with a half a cake. And then when they're teenagers, they may bury it with something that's even worse. Unfortunately, childhood obesity can lead to diabetes, can lead to high blood
we're
pressure,
finding it's off the charts.
high cholesterol. It leads to a lot of things.
And the medical costs that we're incurring that in childhood obesity that is then going into adulthood, we can eliminate half of the medical costs we're incurring that are being brought on just by lifestyle.
Absolutely. And it goes all the way back to pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Do you know that in your first trimester, if you are considered obese, your children have doubled, that child that you've carried will double its chances of being obese. So it goes back to good nutrition for moms when they're pregnant. Mm-hmm. And it affects these children, which will affect them later in life, and they run the risk of being very, very sick. Positive things that we can do, and I think we need to maybe focus
and I
on
want to jump back,
positive
right,
things.
And I want to jump back to, because so we talk about family night. So a great thing to do once a week is let the kids pick a recipe they like. They can find them online. They can go into a cookbook, whatever they prefer, and find a recipe you like, and then and everybody decides, okay, or somebody can pick out the entree, if someone else can pick out, the side dishes, include a dessert, whatever it is. Then the whole family, then you go to the grocery store with the children, teach them how to shop and select.
Yes.
Show them what the fruits and vegetables are. Show them, look at this lovely case of whatever, proteins. Teach them how to read a food label. And if you don't know how to read a food label, there's nothing wrong with that. Go online and teach yourself how to read one first, and then you can help your kids. Or there are many resources out there, dietitians, nutritionists that can help it if you want a little guidance in that area. But then select the food, then go home and learn how to cook the food in a little healthier manner. Maybe broil and bake instead of frying. Maybe use, a 1 or 2% dairy product instead of a full-fat dairy product. Make it a whole family experience, and then set the table. Dine together as a family. Talk.
Absolutely. When I was a child, I used to spend summers with my brother, who was 24 years older than I am. I was the real caboose in the family. And once a week, it was my job as a 12, 13 years old, to pick out a recipe, go to the store, they would hand me money, my sister-in-law would drop me off, I would pick out the food, which I think today it's probably better to go with the child so we can do some of the things that you're suggesting, looking at organic foods, looking at healthier food choices, teaching them how to read labels. But I had to come home and cook the meal and set the table and clean up, and I was to do that once a week. And it was a real learning experience for me in how to manage money, because I had a certain amount of money they would hand me, and I had to do the shopping. And it started me on, I like to cook. This is a fun thing to do. Now, I think I was more or less the only child in his household, but if you have more than one child, you really kind of work together and let children do this as a family project.
And even if they're friends, if they want to have their friends over for dinner, hey, let's decide together, and you can make it a little bit of a social event. Let's decide what we're going to serve. What do you want to serve your friends? How are we going to make this? That can help influence others as well, like the domino effect.
Well, and it goes back to, what are your 3 tasks as a good parent? Teaching them competence. They feel good about doing something like this. Teaching them competence, confidence, and independence. It feeds into all of the 3 things that we said are a parent's job to teach them.
What about when we talk about balance? I think that's a critical term that all of us at any age have to work on, because our lifestyles are so moving today.
And I'm a firm believer, whenever I've counseled anyone, I use the term balance, and I use 4 areas of concentration. And one, we've talked a little bit about, the physical piece of it. And that incorporates good nutrition as well as physical activities. Calories in, calories out. When we were away last week, I walked with a friend. My husband was at a conference, and I walked probably 7 miles in a day, and I pretty much could eat whatever I wanted to when you're walking that much. And I was a little nervous about, will I gain some weight? You know, you're eating better food when you're away. And I didn't, because I exercise more. And I'm not suggesting to anyone to exercise that much. But you do have to monitor physically what you put into your body and how much you're going to expend through physical activity. And I think physical activity, whether it's taking a walk after dinner as a family, what a great way to burn off a little bit of the calories from dinner, and what a great way to talk to your kids, like what was going on. If you're sitting there, we can talk ad nauseum for hours, but kids sometimes don't want to do that. But if you're walking with them, they'll talk. And
I found that interesting when you said when you've worked with kids, you get out of the office setting, so to speak, and you're like, come on, let's take a walk.
Let's take a walk. They'll talk, they'll walk and they'll talk. But if I'm sitting and staring at them like this in my office, they're not going to share a whole lot. But if you're walking, and sometimes there are silences, and that's okay, and then they'll just pop up with something. And kids will do that. If you have an activity you're doing, then they'll say, you know, Grandma, when I did this, this is what happened. And they'll just talk. So I think the physical activity helps kind of pull everything together. And the emotional, the physical, the mental, and as well and the emotional, we'll talk about that. But I think physical, you really do need to incorporate good nutrition as well as physical activity. And I think
it's a 50-50 formula.
Oh, absolutely.
And stress management. But before we get on to stress, I want to say, as we're talking, I think it's important for parents to look at themselves too and say, what kind of example am I setting for my kids? Because we're really good at telling other people how to achieve perfection. Sometimes we don't necessarily want to do it ourselves. We can be real critical of everybody else, but we're like, oh, but I'm too busy. Oh, but I don't have time. Oh, but you really need to look and figure it out, you know?
We communicate to each other 7% verbally, and the rest is all of our nonverbals. So it's not what I'm telling my kids, it's not what I'm telling my grandkids, it's how I'm living. So if I'm telling them they have to exercise and I'm telling them they have to eat well, I better be doing it myself. Because that is a critical part of their learning. It's all on an unconscious level, but they're going to learn more from 93% of what we do than what we say. And that's really, really important. So it takes us taking a step backwards and saying, how am I living? Because my kids are going to learn from me. I've often said that. If you don't want your kids to smoke, don't smoke. That's an important lesson. But if you're saying to them, don't smoke, but you're sitting there smoking, and I use that as an example, they're going to say, wait, they're not authentic. And we'll talk a little bit more about authentic.
And I'm a great one. When both of my parents smoked when I was younger, and so 16 years old, I started to smoke. And when I came home, my mother had a fit. Right? So my father comes home and I said, well, you smoke. And he said, you know, you're making a great point. And then I ended up quitting after, right after college. But anyway, and then my dad followed, and then eventually my mom followed. But it was interesting because, that my dad was like, right, you're right. What am I going to say to you if I'm doing it?
Absolutely, absolutely. The second piece of being balanced is mentally. And I'm a firm believer that we need to, even in the summer, your kids are off in the summer, and there's less and less time that the kids are off. Their school seems to go a little bit longer than it ever did when we were in school. But I think they need to be mentally stimulated, even in the summer. The rule in our household was, especially when I lived with my brother in Virginia, was you have to read something every day and you have to share with me what you've read. It can be the Reader's Digest or a book, and share with me, and how did you feel about it? So that put the responsibility on me to do some reading every day, and then I was expected to talk with them about what I read. And I'm a firm believer kids are not reading as much, and they're not silencing or making themselves still, and consequently they're losing a piece of themselves by not doing that. I don't believe everybody can travel, but you can certainly travel by watching television. I really don't want to go to some parts of the world, ever, but I can certainly pretend like I've been there if I've watched a program on that.
Or read a book.
Or read a book. And so I think that stimulates your mind, and I think you need to stay mentally sharp. And that even helps with older people. So I think little kids, the kids that are read to when they're very little, have an appreciation for reading and have an appreciation for that whole arena when they grow up. So
and this is the stress management part that's so important to being a whole person. Parents need they need to have their own a little quiet time too, where they have time to just focus on themselves.
Absolutely.
Just like, and you have to give it to your kids, but you want to, like you say, it's all part of that balance.
It is, and that brings us into the next piece of balance, the emotionally balanced. And I absolutely believe what you just said, that parents need to have some quiet time for themselves, no matter how many kids you have. And the more kids you have today, the more difficult it is. Larger families used to be 8 to 10 kids. Large families today are 4 to 5 children. They're huge families today because of all of the responsibilities. And so I really believe that on an emotional level, you have to be in touch with where you are emotionally and your stress level, and how you deal with your stress level, how you deal with uncomfortable things in your life, and how you can teach your kids how to cope. I'm a firm believer that kids need to learn how to cope with disappointment. So I think you should say no to your kids every 5th time they ask for something, so they learn about disappointment. That's an important part of being emotionally healthy. If they're given everything nonstop, then they're going to, one, build narcissism within themselves, and they are also not going to know how to deal with disappointment. I have to tell you, the older I get, the more I realize disappointment is truly an important part, or it's a critical part of life. Every one of us, you do not get through this life unscathed. You're going to feel disappointment. And so how you cope with that disappointment on an emotional level is critical.
I think we talk about some of the to-dos. And you have a lovely list of to-dos.
I do. The last piece of balance for me is spiritual. And for me, it's church. But that's not for everyone. And I believe whatever one of the to-dos is, how do you fill up your spiritual cup? And for some people it's church. For some people, we have a really good friend who fly fishes on Sunday morning. And so that's how he fills up his spiritual cup. We have other friends who belong to an ethical society, and they do volunteer work. I think teaching your kids how to give to someone else without expecting anything in return is really critical. I think doing for the neighbor who lives down the street who's ill and saying, I'm going to cut your grass.
Or the grandparent.
Or the grandparent. Or I'm going to shovel snow. I don't see young people out shoveling snow anymore, or cutting grass. We all have agencies, services that cut our grass and shovel our snow. But I think whatever builds your spirit, for some of us, it's dancing.
You're doing quite a bit of that and having a great time with it.
And doing it for volunteer groups, for nursing homes, etc.
And it's a great exercise.
It is a great exercise. And there are a group of us that are all over 60 years old, and that fills up our spirit to do tap, ballet, and jazz. And we do it for groups that for nursing homes, and we did it for the Christian Women's this 2 weeks ago. It's a passion, and whatever your passion is fills up your spirit. I think that's a critical part.
Learn your children's passions. What are your children passionate about? And if it's something that maybe is a little more on the negative side, maybe you can influence them to move it into a more positive side and be supportive of them being able to express themselves with things they love and things they're passionate about.
I agree. I think we live in a society that we are overindulged, that we are over-labeled, we are over-medicated. You know, if your kid has a problem, you drag him off to the doctor and say, what medication do I need? And I think sometimes they just need a parent to set boundaries, you know, the puzzle, and they need a grandparent, an aunt or an uncle, or a friend to be a good mentor to these kids.
And a good lifestyle. Because even with the adults, our first inclination is, I don't feel good, I'm going to the doctor. Well, just take a look. Am I moving enough? How did I eat yesterday? Did I have a little too much to drink? Is my diet maybe the problem as to why I'm always getting an upset stomach or always getting heartburn, or I just don't feel, I don't feel excited to wake up in the morning? Think about your lifestyle first. You control it.
Absolutely. I also think there are two pieces of the child that you have to focus on, and one, letting them be an authentic self, letting them go inside themselves, giving them some quiet time. That's when they will become creative. And my godson, who was at the house yesterday, said, you only become whole when you get in touch with your creative side. So the computer gets you in touch with the whole technological world, but stillness, quietness, an empty room helps you get in touch with your creative side. That's when writers write. That's when pianists conduct. That's when painters paint, is when they have a stillness and a quiet side. And that helps you get in touch with your inner self, and you can make better decisions. That goes back to helping a child become more confident, more competent, and more independent. The second piece of that is their connectedness, their networking. Have them be involved with positive people and how they influence their life. I think children need to know that they are approved of. Mm-hmm. Always. No matter what they do, I'm going to love you. Mm-hmm. No matter how bad you are, I'm going to love you. I approve of you. Don't approve of your behavior. I think parents need to start looking at how many activities their kids are in. I think kids are in a lot of activities to keep themselves busy. You always have to keep in touch with, am I doing this for my child's well-being, or am I doing it because I want the social aspect of it? And you have to keep their best interests at hand versus, is it better for me or is it better for them?
I'm a big believer in planning. I'm a big believer in organizing. And I think another great tip for parents is think about your week and your schedule that includes your work week, your spouses or your significant others, if it's a two-parent family, what their work week involves or what their commitments are. And schedule your family time, schedule when you're going to have time to go to the grocery store, how you're going to cook and maybe prepare some meals ahead. Schedule, I know we're going to do fast food these couple of evenings or these couple of lunches or whatever, but work them in the schedule, but don't let them be the majority of the time. Try to, if you're going to be out of balance, try to have the healthier options, be the 60 and the not so healthy be the 40, and then maybe move it to 70-30 and just kind of work in that direction and just keep a nice balance in mind.
Well, and I think incorporating really healthy things into their life and letting them be a part of decision making, letting them be a part of creating. We're going to do vegetables. Let's go to the store and see what are the different vegetables that we
Or go to a co-op, or go to a farmer's market, because and especially this time of year, you can get things so reasonably priced. That's
Absolutely.
Another thing that's important. This is an affordable way of living. Walking doesn't cost anything. No. Invest in a nice pair of walking shoes, but there are so many things you can do that will not impact the family budget.
Absolutely. The Ville Marie has a co-op, and you pay one fee for the entire season, and you get food until October.
Mm-hmm.
And you go and you bring your basket, and there are different fruits and vegetables that I had never seen before when we did it last year. And it's a set amount, but often if you have the kids working at the villa, you get more food. They'll just say, well, take an extra bag. Towards the end of the season, they're saying, take more. We have more than we know what to do with. So there are other options, and it's all organic. There are a lot of options if you look at things like that. To make it healthy and fun. I think kids love to dig. I think they love to plant. I was watching.
Have a garden. Do a family garden maybe, or a neighborhood garden.
Absolutely. We had a friend that I was babysitting years ago, and my daughter called and said, what are you doing? I said, well, I had little Anthony digging holes. She goes, Mom, that's terrible. I said, he wasn't so good in the house, but in the backyard, he's loving digging holes for my flowers. He's having a good time. And kids, I think we underestimate them. I think we need to get back outside. We need to get back to playing. We need to get back to nature. I think those are all really positive things for kids. So they get back to who they are and figure that out so they can fit in all of the puzzle pieces in the boundaries that you set for them. I think a family should have a no secret rule. There are no secrets in this household. That builds the emotional piece, and we can share anything with each other. That's on the emotional side. On the physical side, let the kids be a part of choosing their own discipline. They're going to be harder on themselves than any parent will be, and have it as a positive thing for children. That helps them not stuff their feelings. And we're going back to the childhood obesity, that you don't want them to ever stuff their feelings. So, a no secret rule. We're going to do positive reinforcement. We're going to have a You Are Special day. So you get to select what we do today, and tomorrow I get to select what we do. And that teaches them negotiation. That teaches them...
Oh, I like that a lot.
Oh, it's you have to do it. I'll do whatever you want today, but tomorrow, then it's my day. So in a family, it teaches them some really positive things and skills that they can take into adulthood. And I think a family night is critical for a family. It's just our family. And so they build the bond of family.
And I like doing a family night maybe at home, and then if you do a family night out or a physical activity night, we're gonna play ball. I mean, you can jump rope, get an inexpensive ball, play kickball, throw a baseball, throw a football. Go to a toy store with your kids and look for things that will get them moving. And the other important point of this whole balance thing I do want to say is, and make sure your kids are getting good sleep, a good night's rest.
Absolutely. I mean, sleep, being creative, good nutrition, physical activity, sharing their feelings. Those are the things that will prevent children from becoming obese. Those are the things that kind of build their foundation so they will not be prey to anything when they're teenagers. They will not be prey to drug use or need to...
It cultivates a good human being. Those are good rules for all of us.
Absolutely. If they have to numb their feelings, they're going to have to do it with something. And so they're going to do it as children with food, and then as adults they'll do it with just as detrimental substances. And so we want to prevent it, and it can be prevented, or at least a good part of it can, as children. There was an old saying, and we talked about it yesterday, and everything that is old isn't mold. Everything that is new isn't true. It's a balance. It is truly a balance between bringing something from your grandparents and their story into your life and bringing the new technology into your life, but limiting both. I don't want to go back to living like my grandma did, truly. But I do want to incorporate some of the beautiful things that the grandparents have incorporated into their lives, into my life, and into my children's life. I just found the picture of my grandmother and grandfather of 120 years ago when this picture was taken on their wedding day. And I have it on my refrigerator to remind me of, that there was something really good about what they had given us. But I wouldn't want to live like they lived. Absolutely. So there's something really good about my grandchildren and what they're doing. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter who can use my telephone easier than I can. And she can find games on it. And I'm thinking, wow. I mean, it took me a long time to figure this out. But I do limit the time when they're at my house. Other than when we come into the house and maybe we'll watch a movie and I make healthy popcorn and they think Grandma makes the best popcorn on the face of the earth, it's healthy, and then we will sit and we have quiet time. We have stillness, because stillness is a really important piece of my connection with grandchildren or with children or with nieces and nephews. And so there's a combination of both. I don't want people to think that we're just active all the time. Sometimes we will sit, we will color. Sometimes we will play a game. The old game Fish still works in my house. And it's a game that I played when I was a child, and my grandchildren still love it.
Awesome. Ro, thank you so much. And to our parents out there, make sure that you're feeling good. I want them to know. Make sure you're feeling good about yourselves too, because I think we get caught up in our world of so much criticism. So everybody wants to tell us what we're doing wrong. So few people, even as adults, and sometimes at our places of work or our friends and family, they think they're helping us by telling us you're doing, all these things wrong. And if it's starting to bother you, find people who are giving you positive feedback and telling you about all the great things you're doing right. Because you've got to feel good about yourself so that then we can help these younger people feel good about themselves.
And again, I said it in the last program, I will say it again, we all make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And as parents, we're going to make mistakes. It's okay. As a grandma, I'm going to make mistakes. And it's okay as long as you recover from it. If you make a mistake, say you're sorry.
Exactly.
And change your behavior for the next time. And I think parents need to hear that. They can't be perfect parents all the time.
Nobody's perfect.
No one's perfect.
And everyone, remember, the internet is a great resource. If you want to think about physical activities, different things you can do with your family. And if you want to think about some healthier recipes, learn how to read a food label. Like I said earlier, there are so many sources to help us become a healthier, more fit society. I want to thank my guest, Rose, always, hon, for being here. I love you.
And I love you too. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. I'm Mary Pepino, and this is Fit for You.